Hi, guys. The hearing is still, Judge Gorsuch's hearing is ongoing, and considering the significant attention, I'm going to try to keep this a little on the shorter side today. The President's making a full day of progress towards some of his biggest promises that he's made to the American people. This morning, he met with the House Republican Conference members on Capitol Hill ahead of the House's scheduled vote on the American Health Care Act, which is currently scheduled for Thursday. During the meeting, the President reminded members of the House conference that repealing and replacing Obamacare has been a promise that Republicans have been making to voters for years. Members made it clear that if voters put a Republican in the White House and continue Republican majorities in the House and the Senate, that we would repeal and replace this ill-advised and legislation. And for every member who pledged the American people that they would deliver on their promise, this is really their chance. This is the repeal of Obamacare that Republicans have been working on for years, and voters have been waiting for this for some time. On Thursday, as the House gathers on the floor and casts their votes for the ACH, it'll exactly be 7 years after President Obama has signed Obamacare into law. We're hoping to make this the last anniversary that Americans will have to endure Obamacare. Republicans have been working to repeal and replace this misguided law ever since, and now, under President Trump, we will finally be able to take this step forward towards fundamental reform of our healthcare system. I think most Americans remember the lines that were used to sell Obamacare 7 years ago. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan. But for millions of Americans, those lines proved to be nothing more than empty promises. Plans that their families had relied on for years were suddenly canceled. Premiums and deductibles skyrocketed, leaving many who had plans unable to actually use them. And insurers fled the marketplace. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans only have one insurer offering plans on their Obamacare exchange. President Trump and Republicans in Congress will keep their promise by reforming the system once and for all. And that's exactly what we're doing with the American Health Care Act, which, along with the additional legislative and administrative action that is part of the three-prong approach that we've continued to outline, will finally give all Americans the health care system they deserve, where market-based competition leads to more affordable, higher quality health care opportunities. This is an ongoing process, and the President has made it clear to Congress that they should be open to incorporating some of the common sense policy proposals that have been suggested by members in both chambers who share their commitment to improving the health care system. To that end, the House introduced several technical and policy amendments to the legislation last night, which the President acknowledged on Capitol Hill this morning. They include delivering more immediate relief from Obamacare's taxes, accelerating the repeal of these taxes from 2017 rather than from 2018, and ensuring that millions of Americans who paid Obamacare's penalties or taxes can reclaim their hard-earned dollars from the IRS. It's making it easier for Americans to deduct more of the cost of their medical expenses, protecting life by prohibiting taxpayer dollars from being used to help purchase insurance plans that currently cover abortion, giving states additional flexibility for their Medicaid program, covering traditional adults and children populations while maintaining baseline funding for elderly and disabled populations, giving states the ability to implement optional, reasonable work requirements for able-bodied adults without dependents as part of their Medicaid programs, freezing Obamacare's Medicaid expansion while allowing for a responsible unwinding so that people who enroll before 2020 will continue to be supported by the program, and providing a more generous reimbursement for elderly and disabled Medicaid enrollees, recognizing that those populations have unique needs that must be taken care of. After a return to the White House from the House, speaking to the House Republican Conference, the President received his daily intelligence briefing. Then the President signed S-442, the NASA Administration Transition Authorization Act of 2017, acting on another of the President's most ambitious promises to the American people. Many may recall in his joint address, the President said, quote, "American footprints on distant worlds are not too big of a dream," end quote. And with this bill, he is taking the latest step towards making that dream a reality by reiterating NASA's mission to ensure America remains a leader in space exploration. This bipartisan, bicameral legislation provides NASA with the full support it needs to fulfill this and many other important missions, including supporting NASA's plan to explore deep space and sending astronauts to Mars, including an endorsement of launching the Mars 2020 rover, The rover will explore a site that is likely to have been habitable, seeking signs of past life and testing compelling samples and techniques for future robotic and eventual human exploration of Mars, reaffirming that NASA remains a fully multi-mission agency with a balanced set of core missions in space science, space technology, aeronautics, human spaceflight, exploration, and education, endorsing NASA's continued progress towards launching the James Webb Telescope, which will be a giant leap forward in our ever-evolving quest to understand the universe, and establishing an astronaut occupational health care program, something that NASA has considered a priority for years. After the bill signing, the Vice President also announced that the President will be taking action shortly to relaunch the National Space Council, which the Vice President will chair. The President was honored to sign this new bill into law so that NASA can continue its work towards making America the world leader in space exploration once again. On the Senate side of the Hill, the President's pick for the Supreme Court, Judge Neil Gorsuch, has been doing a phenomenal job in the Senate today during his first day of questioning. The judge's eloquent testimony yesterday was widely praised from both sides of the aisle, and it's clear that everyone agrees from a broad spectrum that Judge Gorsuch is a very qualified person to serve on the Supreme Court. In terms of follow-up from yesterday, I was asked about North Korea, and I want to provide a quick update from the NSC. Quote, the United States, in coordination with our allies, is exploring a new range of diplomatic, security, and economic measures in response to the grave and escalating threat posed by North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile program. Pursuant to the President's executive order on interior enforcement that he signed on January 25th, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, ICE, released its first weekly list of detainer requests, which local law enforcement agencies have failed to comply with. These examples were criminal illegals who have been arrested or convicted in many cases of serious and violent crimes threaten public safety. In each instance, local law enforcement is refusing to cooperate with ICE in its efforts to remove illegal immigrants who have committed a crime. It is part of the President's continued efforts to keep our community safe. A copy of this report is available on the ICE website that details all of the municipalities where there has been an issue and the crime that has been committed and the person and not necessarily the person's name, but the offense in which they were convicted of.
On health care, the President came away from Capitol Hill sounding pretty positive about where he was going to go on Thursday, but then at the same time, Heritage Action came out and said it was going to encourage members to vote no. Club for Growth is taking out ads attacking this bill. Jim Jordan has said President's great, but it's still a bad bill. This is going to go to a vote day after tomorrow. What gives the President the sense of optimism that he can get this through, and might he request more changes from Speaker Ryan before it goes to a vote?
Well, I think we've talked about this for days. There's been a lot of input from members of Congress, and I think that the meeting this morning really was a huge sign of support. There was a lot of enthusiasm and optimism, not just for the bill itself, but for something that, as I noted, conservatives and Republicans and a lot of Democrats, frankly, have been fighting for a while, which is a more patient-centric health care system. I think the President's continued to engage with members. He will continue to do that all the way through Thursday. But as I also noted, there were a lot of changes that were made by the Speaker last night. Additional legislation, the three-prong approach that we've talked about in the past, has been put forward to actually make sure that members understood the comprehensive nature of this. This is one vehicle. There's a huge administrative piece that Secretary Price will administer through administrative action that was given to him when they passed this bill and gave that authority to Kathleen Sebelius, then the Secretary of Health and Human Services, to implement pieces that they couldn't get done legislatively. We can now unwind a lot of that and add a lot of consumer-based and competition measures through the administrative thing. But then the third prong, all of the other stuff that we've talked about for years as Republicans, buying across state lines, expanding health savings accounts, et cetera, all of that has now been introduced as well. And I think that he continues to meet with members and walk away with a very, very optimistic view of where the bill is headed. I think a lot of the measures that have been changed and tweaked and updated have assuaged members who had concerns or wanted to see some additional tightening. But keep in mind, if you are a conservative who has been fighting for repeal and replace, this is your chance. If you are a conservative who has been looking to address out of control entitlement spending, this is the first attempt. This is the first reform of an entitlement program in terms of Medicaid in 30 years. These are a truly conservative set of principles that we are fighting for. The competition that's in the bill, the ability to allow prices to come down and choice to go up. There's nothing more conservative that is in this bill. And I think as members continue to talk about ideas that have been included in this bill and the principles of it, we feel very good.
President Trump has previously indicated that he wanted to appoint pro-life judges who would be willing to overturn Roe versus Wade. Yet in his testimony today, Judge Gorsuch said he would have walked out the door if President Trump asked if he had this position. Is President Trump still confident that Judge Gorsuch would be willing to overturn Roe versus Wade? And is this position still important to him?
I think the president's comments speak for themselves. I think the president's list that he's put out on 20 are jurists that both the Federalist Society and Heritage have deemed to be people who interpret the Constitution as originalists, as people who aren't looking to legislate from the bench. And I'm not going to take the bait during a live hearing to comment on that, but I appreciate the effort. Veronica.
Sean, I have two questions on the same story. Recently, a 14-year-old girl, she was raped in the boys' bathroom of her high school. A 17 and 18-year-old boy have been charged. One of the boys, we know, unlawfully entered the country. Both of them have outstanding orders with ICE. So here's my first question about it. Currently, schools are prohibited from denying access to public education based on immigration status. Does the president hear a story like that and think that it should change or be addressed in a future executive order?
I think, first, let me just say that this is a tragic event, and it's horrendous and horrible and disgusting what this young woman in Rockville went through. I can't possibly imagine. So first of all, let's remember the human side of this, that this is a tragic event that no child, no person, no parent should ever have to deal with. Schools should be a place where a parent puts their child on a bus or drops them off or sees them off and knows that they're safe. And the idea that this occurred is shocking, disturbing, horrific, and whatever other words that come to mind that someone can think of, because this is not, schools should be a safe place where children are there to learn and to feel safe in that kind of environment. And to know that this happened in the circumstances, this young woman in particular fought to come to this country legally because of the freedoms and the treasures of this nation. And to think that this kind of tragedy would occur to someone who's personally endured that kind of struggle to come to this nation and then face this is reprehensible. And it is not who we are as a country. I think it is troubling, and I think further to your question, the president recognizes that education is a state-run and a local-run issue, but I think it is cause for concern what happened there. And I think the city should look at its policies and I think that this is something that authorities are going to have to look at. I think from an immigration standpoint, clearly to see somebody, there's so many facets of this case that deserve question. Why was there, I think he was 17 or 18 years old. 18, thank you. And how does that person get put into the 9th grade? There's so many issues that come up in this case. I will leave it to authorities to get through, but I think that we are in the early stages of this, and there's a lot that needs to get addressed with respect to this case in particular.
For you, one on healthcare to follow up on the follow-ups. You made very clear that the president was going to be supporting those who supported the bill. And I know you don't want to talk about the flip side of the coin, but when he talked this morning in the closed-door meeting about people paying a price, losing seats, not getting majority, is that an implied threat from the president to these members who don't back this bill?
No, I think it's a political reality.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Caitlin. I have two questions. First, the author David Horowitz, in his book, The Big Agenda, writes of what he calls, quote, a deep state, end of quote, in which he said these are Obama holdovers in government who are trying to undercut the president's agenda. This has been widely repeated on social media. Does the president himself believe in this deep state?
Well, I've been asked this question before, and I'll give you the same answer I've given before, which is I think there are people that burrow into the government after an administration. This is going back since the beginning of time. They used to call it ram specking. It's suddenly no longer permitted, but in terms of that same way. But this has been going on since the country came to be, where people burrow in after an administration into a civil servant job. But sure, that there's people after 8 years of Obama that found their way into government, so it should be no huge secret. Okay?
Right. My other question was, over the weekend, Governor Graco Ramirez, the head of the Mexican Governors Association, was again in Washington, and in a much publicized statement said that Mexico had scored its first victory over the proposed wall. He said that in the president's budget there's a line item for $2.6 billion
In FY18.
in tax dollars, and no mention of Mexico paying for the wall in any way. He's claimed a victory in that. Your response to Governor Graco Ramirez?
It's a little early to be claiming victory. I think the president's made it clear that he was going to use the current process to start the construction of the wall, and that there would be ways that fulfillment of that pledge would come through.
Thank you. The administration and the president have repeatedly said that over the next few weeks they will present evidence that he was wiretapped. And last week he said it would be coming this week, and he may speak on it this week. Can we expect the president to this week present evidence that he was wiretapped by Barack Obama, or will he speak about it? Because he didn't mention it last night in his rally in Kentucky.
And by the way, I am very happy that the individual in the press corps who took Tom Brady's jersey, that has been returned properly. Another bat on the press, but we have righted that wrong. Thank you.